I'm explaining all 9 forms of Luffy, while 4th is the rarest one, 7th one is my favorite. But let's start with his base form. Although he isn't big and bulky like many strong One Piece characters, Luffy doesn't fail to impress us with his strength. Rather, his small size helps him become much faster, being capable of using all kinds of haki, and as a user of Hito no Mi God Nika, Luffy is already pretty strong without any further forms. During pre-time escape, Luffy defeated multiple enemies like Arlong, Crocodile and Enel without further obtaining any new actual forms. However, he struggles to do so after Water 7. Luffy also started using Conqueror's Haki unconsciously later on, making him capable of knocking down many weak opponents without actually fighting them. After time escape, his strength goes even further and he knocked down 50,000 fishmans just with his Conqueror's Haki. Although he rarely doesn't use any gears to fight after time skip, it's safe to say his base form kept improving, as we saw Luffy clashing with opponents like Doflamingo and Katakuri on his base. Of course, he couldn't have beaten them without gears, but it was still pretty impressive. And now since Luffy can use Advanced Armament, Advanced Observation and Advanced Conquerors, in my opinion Luffy now can beat most of the second commanders without using any further forms. Next, we have Gear 2nd, which was first seen on NS Lobby. In this form, Luffy increases his blood flow, which greatly increases his physical capabilities and makes him lot more faster. Initially, Luffy activated this by pumping blood through his legs, activating effect across his entire body, but after the time escape, he was shown to have more control over it and can activate it easily in any selected part. Luffy used Gear 2nd to easily overpower Rokusugi user Bluno and then later defeat Lucci, Moria, Pacifista and many other opponents whom he wasn't able to do anything in his base. He also used Gear 3rd there as well, but we'll talk about that later. However, Gear 2nd still was more iconic. Every time Luffy used Gear 2nd, it was moment of hype for pre-time escape. But it doesn't feel same way after time escape, except for Red Hawk. When Luffy combines Haki strength with his Gear 2nd speed, it causes his fist to ignite into flames. Current Luffy's Red Hawk is so strong that it forced Kaido to actually dodge the attack. Based on these impressions, I rate Luffy's Gear 2nd around similar level as Yamato or Zoro. Before rarest form and favorite form of many of us, let's talk about his Gear 3rd, where Luffy inflates any of his body part to enhance the strength. To use this form, Luffy makes a small opening on his thumb joint and blows hard into his bones, which inflates his arm, and after that he can transfer that ear to any of his other body part as well. Gear 3rd makes Luffy's any particular part so big that it becomes the size equivalent to that of giants. With his already strong physiology, this apparently gives his arms more mass and area to attack with far greater strength. However, Luffy needs to sacrifice his mobility for that. Also, during pre-time skip, Luffy used to get shrunken after deactivation of Gear 3rd, and on this shrunken form, Luffy has little to no strength and ability. Luffy spends on his shrunken form roughly equivalent to the amount of time he spent on Gear 3rd. However, Luffy has solved this problem after time skip. We saw Luffy using Gear 3rd for the first time against Lucci, and Luffy later uses to defeat Jailer Beast, Caesar, Shinzao and many more. Luffy can also use Gear 3rd while he is in Gear 2nd, making it combined gear, but it was considered risky for Luffy by Chopper. But when Luffy didn't have any choices left, he used both gears against Moria. Also recently, we have seen Luffy using Gear 2nd and Gear 3rd with armament coating to perform Red Rock attack. And with that, talking of Luffy's current strength in Gear 3rd, while I don't think there is much gap between Gear 2nd and 3rd after time skip, Gear 3rd is just slightly stronger. Now let's talk about Luffy's best form during pre-time escape, the Nightmare Luffy. Nightmare Luffy was Luffy's form after he was greatly powered up by 100 shadows implanted into him. Over the years, while trying desperately to recover their own shadows, people whose shadows were stolen by Moria learned that they could capture shadows from zombies and put that into themselves to gain the abilities of shadow for a short period of time. Using this knowledge, they imbued Luffy with 100 shadows and turned him into this form. On this form, Luffy had all Gomu Gomu no techniques, but he could also use combined strength and skills like swordmanships of all 100 shadows within him. His strength was so high, he easily overpowered Zombies, who not only was huge inside but also had rubber techniques. Luffy could also move at incredible speed, having safely rescued Nami and Usopp from a rampaging Oars. This form lasted only 10 minutes, but within that period Luffy defeated Oars that wasn't defeated by combined strength of whole crew previously. Definitely justified the name Nightmare. Gear 4th. Gear 4th is a transformation technique that uses power of Gomu Gomu no Mi and Augment Haki. It has multiple variations that enhances some amount of Luffy's defense, speed and power beyond his normal limits. The first version of this form is Boundman Luffy, which was first seen during his battle against Doflamingo during Dressrosa. It is the power boosted Gear 4th, in which his body becomes much larger in size with his arms, upper torso and legs coated in Augment Haki. As a side effect, Luffy is incapable of standing still on ground. Luffy learned this gear during 2-year time skip with Rayleigh, and this form seems to utilize principles of Rokushiki, since it possesses both high speed movements like Soru and the ability to kick off the air in order to fly like Geppo. According to Doflamingo, Luffy's attacks is greatly magnified as he can perform attacks like King Kongan and Kong Gatling, which are highly destructive, as well as his durability is also enhanced. Despite being hardened with armor and haki, his body is still rubbery, so physical blows simply bounce off him. However, if opponent's armament is much more superior to Luffy's, it won't help him. This is also the most common version of Gear 4 that we have seen Luffy using multiple times, and it's understandable considering it is a power-based form which could give Luffy advantage against pretty much every opponent. But the biggest drawback of not only this form but all Gear 4 version is that once Luffy reaches the limit of Gear 4, he won't be able to use haki for next 10 minutes, and in this state Luffy is extremely vulnerable, often falling asleep. However, it seems like Luffy is overcoming his stamina issue over the time. Next version of Gear 4 is Tankman Luffy. Currently, the base form of Tankman is unknown, since the only time it has been used was after Luffy ate massive amount of Crackers biscuit to the point where he was completely full and used his stuffed version. Luffy's durability rises sharply in this form, as he was capable of tanking and deflecting a strike from Charlotte Cracker, where previously Cracker was able to cut deep into Luffy's arm when Luffy was in Boundman. His rubbery properties in this form allowed Luffy to literally squeeze Cracker and send him flying. His massive size helped him to increase his defense, but Luffy most likely cannot move freely like Boundman, and yeah, it's pretty much what we know about this form, since it's the only time Luffy used it. But let's move to the much interesting one, Snakeman. During his battle with Charlotte Katakuri, Luffy revealed another form of Gear 4 known as Snakeman. Unlike other two Gear 4 forms, it doesn't make Luffy fat, rather it makes him look cool, and it's also by far my favorite form. In this form, Luffy gains increase in speed and ability to use Python to change the directions of his attacks, which gives him the opportunity to attack any area of opponent with ease. This form focuses on dealing with agile opponents who specialize on dodging and requires Luffy's observation haki mastery. However, because of his body's lack of inflation, Luffy's defense is much more worse compared to Boundman and Tankman forms. When he was thrown into structures by Katakuri, he took the impact like he normally would, as opposed to the bouncing as he does in Boundman. Luffy used this form for the second time against Kaido, dealing significant amount of damage, and I hope we would see this form more often. And finally, we have Gear 5. This is the pinnacle of what Luffy can do. The strongest form of Luffy's Gear 5 is awakened version of Gomu Gomu no Mi, which also reveals the true nature of his fruit, as it being mythical zone type Hito Hito no Mi Moral Nika. This awakening grants Luffy increased strength and freedom, allowing him to fight in a way he wanted. This version of Luffy is described as the most ridiculous power in the world, and it can be seen when Luffy defeated Kaido, the strongest creature, using this form. In this state, Luffy's heartbeat takes a musical rhythm as the drums of liberation, and his hair and clothes turn white. As an awakened zone, Luffy is afforded far greater strength, speed and durability than those with unawakened zone power. Notably, he gains enough strength and speed to match and eventually overpower Rob Lucci's own awakened zone form without getting any serious against him. In terms of durability, he could as well take a direct hit from Kaido's Bolo Breath attack with only being barely hurt. This also includes a faster recovery rate which functions automatically even when he is unconscious. In fact, the physical feats Luffy has in this form are totally absurd, recovering instantly, expanding himself to the greater size than the size of giants, catching lightning and make his fist as big as island. There seems nothing Luffy cannot do on Gear 5th. We still haven't fully understood what this form actually can do and what cannot, but it's clear it's super strong. But what's even more stronger is Afro Luffy, and I don't think I need to explain it, right? Check out this video of all Yonkos getting ranked, subscribe this channel and see you there.